So where are you from?
Crown Heights, Brooklyn.
Okay. That would be the home of Chabad.
Yeah.
Are you a part of Chabad?
Yeah, I grew up Chabad. I'm Chabad. I've always been. Yeah.
Okay. So religious Judaism. For our viewers out there, how would you describe what is religious Judaism to you? Your faith, the role that God plays in your life, Hashem.
Right. So I grew up Chabad. I grew up religious, and so like being religious from the way I grew up is like, there's the Torah, there's halacha, the laws of Judaism, right? And when you follow that makes you religious, right? That's the general term. But then there's also the God part of it, which is that the way that Chabad brings it down is that there's a relationship between myself and God. There's this thing going on. It's not just like we're just this small creation that's amongst the world, the 7 billion. We're here in New York. You experience the millions, and that's already a lot. So it's more so that like there's God. He created me and wants me to have a relationship with Him. So in regards to being religious, so sometimes we see it as just, there's hat, jacket, there's a certain uniform, and all those wearing it, like, okay, that's religious and he's not. Or, and I think it's more that there are certain people that have a connection to God, which is where we surround our life. It's like we want to just be connecting every day on whatever level we can to God through prayer, through learning, and all that stuff.
Growing up in a religious Jewish home, did Christianity ever come up, or were you ever taught about Christianity? And if so, what did you grow up learning?
Well, I mean, in the age of the internet, it doesn't matter what you grew up with. You obviously know about everything. But I grew up, even in New York, like you see Christians, you see churches, you see all that. I mean, I'm not so thoroughly. I don't know it so well. I don't know much of their belief or all that. I know that there's general idea that there's Jesus, there's Son of God, whatever that whole way that it is, but I'm not so very familiar with it, no.
Traditionally, Jewish people do not believe in Jesus. What do you think the reasons are behind that?
So we generally believe, like, there's one God, that's that, right? There's Shema, and we're saying that there is only one God, and that's all. And so the difference between, I've heard the argument of like, oh, well, in different sects of Judaism, there's rabbis, and sometimes, like, especially in Chabad, like, they can be glorified, and people are like, oh, that's very similar to what we believe, like, there's God, and then there's some sort of intermediary, and it's not exactly that. We're not saying that this person has any power. It's more so that, like, God is, we call him the King of Kings, and then you could say that there's ministers that are in between. And me asking myself, like, hey, I want this, I want, whether it's to have sustenance, whether it's to have a roof over my head, health, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, I can ask for that, but then you can also go to somebody who already has a very deep connection with the king and say, hey, can you ask on my behalf? Can you, you're close with the king, can you help me out with this? In the same way that we go to our congressmen and senators to kind of like ask for help from the president, right? We want something from the president. Instead of writing directly, we go through somebody else. But that person himself doesn't have any godlike power. He's just close. He's more in tune, connected with God and everybody else. As opposed to, I think, with Christianity, it's that we're saying that Jesus himself is the source of my answer. He is the one that's going to forgive me. He is the one. Whereas, like, if you were to say that in the relationship of a person and a king, that would be when you go against a king, what's that called? Treason. Yeah. I mean, if there's a king and I was like, oh, I'm just going to go to his minister and ask him for permission to do what I'm trying to do, you'd say, like, well, that's wrong. You need to ask the king for permission for that. So it's kind of in that way that I think is the biggest differentiation. But yeah.
Are you waiting for the coming of the Moshiach?
I mean, yeah, that's the general idea always, is that, like, right now it's difficult, and I think this is almost like a universal kind of thing, which is, I think, also because everybody has it, there's so much conflict over, like, who is Messiah, what is Messiah, like, you're saying it's this, but I'm saying it's this, and the idea at the end of the day is that there's going to be a redemption, there's going to be a almost, like we always say, like, world peace is what we're after, we want to have unification, we don't want to be fighting, we don't want to. And I would say that like we're all waiting for it, and that's like I think an essential thing, which is that like whenever anybody is going through a rough time, right, like the best thing you can always do for yourself is always believe that there is something coming that is going to be a redemption from this current thing, right? We just came from Passover. That's the whole idea there. It's like, you know, that we were in exile for like 250 years, I think it was, something around that.
400.
Well, 400 years
from the promise.
Right. But the actual, like, the enslavement was for, like, about 250 years, if I remember offhand. And the idea was, like, there's like, 250 years, like, 2.5 lifetimes, right, of exile. And then, like, but at the end of the day, they knew that they were going to be getting out. They were going to go to the promised land. They had, like, you know, they were in one place, but their eyes were already on the future where they were trying to go. And I think that Messiah represents the same idea for everybody, which is that, like, we want world peace. We have all these, like, wishes of what the world can be. And believing in Messiah is just believing that that's going to come, and that's what's getting us through our day today.
Explain to us a little bit more of your thoughts on the resurrection of the dead.
Well, it's actually the Maimonides, or Rambam, depending on how you know it. He writes that that's one of the 13 core beliefs is the coming of Messiah, and then also the resurrection of the dead. It's a core belief that, like, you know, I mean, if you think about it, it's something that a lot of people, I think, hold on to when it comes to the dark times, when somebody passes, and immediate family, friends, or anything like that. It's like one of the things we look forward to is, like, you know, the reunification with the loved ones, and so it is a core belief. It is something that is written about, yeah.
What are your inner thoughts or your initial response when people will say to you, Jesus is the Jewish Messiah?
I mean, the first thought that comes to mind is that I disagree. Based off what I've learned and based off the way I was brought up, I don't see how that can be a truth. But I can understand how, from somebody that grew up in a different way, meaning if I were to grow up Christian, I imagine that, like, I'd have a similar belief. Now, again, like, going back to what I said earlier, is that if you take this idea that, like, oh, Jesus is the Messiah, and, like, you're just wrong, then that's going to create a turmoil of hate. That, because you're just imposing your opinion without conversation, and that I think, how do we say, that brings about hate. That's what's going to cause it. But if you sit down and have a conversation, why do you believe that this is the case? Why do I believe, like, where's your belief come from? Where's my belief come from? And have a conversation about it. We're able to technically both be right, because at the end of the day, it's a belief thing. It's a faith thing. Based off my learning, based off everything I've looked into, I believe that Moshiach is not Jesus. That's not who I believe it is. But based off the way you grew up and everything you've learned, you might think he is, and that's not either wrong. It's faith.
So if one of your family members came out and professed that they believed that Jesus was the Messiah, how would you and your family respond to that?
I mean, I could say for myself, I can't speak for my family specifically, but I can say for myself that, like, at the end of the day, like, we believe that every Jew is a Jew, and that regardless to, like, what their connection with God and whether they think Jesus is Messiah, or who they think Messiah is, and who they think the true religion is, and whatever it is, at the end of the day, there is a commandment to love a fellow Jew, and being Jewish is not something you can walk away from. I was recently in Israel in a school where, like, it was a whole bunch of people that converted or that didn't grow up necessarily religious, and so I spent a lot of time with them. And for example, one of them, like, he has Jewish lineage, meaning his family, he could technically be Jewish without converting, because his family is Puerto Rican, and a lot of people that fled from Spain went to Puerto Rico and those areas, and so he has Jewish lineage, he has stuff like that, but it's unconfirmed exactly if it's mother to maternally if he's Jewish, so that's where it counts. But at the end of the day, we'll still consider him as a Jew, whether he believes in God or not. That doesn't change his status as a Jew, and we still have the commandment to love him.
Thank you, Yankee.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Yeah, no problem. That was very kind of you to do that.